if it's a 50% skim or a whey protein concentrate, which is basically what bodybuilders are chasing for muscle and for skeletal development, that's the key ingredient in the product. But the label tells you nothing about the product. You have no idea what level of heat was used in the drying of those products, or the downgraded products, or whatever is going into the product. So if you have a system that's working and you trust the product or the rep that you're dealing with, I'd say you'd be reluctant to change.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this final part in a 4-part podcast series on dairy calf to beef, on this week's episode I'm joined by Gannon from Volac to discuss feeding the calf up to weaning and the key do's and don'ts around feeding milk replacer. Liam, you're very welcome. What should farmers look for on a milk replacer label when choosing a product?
To be honest, labels don't tell you much, Catherine. Farmers tend to buy, sometimes, a lot of times on price, but they'll also be looking at the level of protein and what oil is in the product, right? Look, if you have a milk replacer and it's performing for you and your system is good, I'd be very reluctant to change, because if you have to spend time in the calf shed treating calves when things go wrong, just because you thought something was good value or you decided to change, it's kind of foolish. Like you don't fix what's not broken. But in terms of a label, I generally be looking for somewhere around 18 to 20% oil, and oil is important because all milk replacers are byproducts. The oil in there is come from palm. It's not milk fat, and milk fat in whole milk is going to be over 35%. So things about milk replacer, you have less oil, but that gives you a calf that's more keen to get on the concentrate. But when you have the month of February and the temperatures are cold, like we have at the minute, only 6 degrees, that little bit of extra energy is important there. If you're feeding lower oil products that are down around 16%, you definitely need to increase the overall concentration of the powder being fed. So anything from around a 23% protein, 20% oil, there's no real need to be going up to 25% protein. You get adequate growth at somewhere around 22 to 23%. And something then with low ash, the lower the ash, the better, around 7%. And as near as possible zero fiber, because if the fiber level is high in it, it's indicating that there's a certain amount of plant or vegetable protein in there, which is not as digestible to the young calf as what your dairy byproducts are. After that, I would say to your mixing temperature. Mixing temperature will probably tell you more on the back of a label than what actually the ingredients will tell you. And if you're looking at something that's saying that has to be mixed at 50 to 55 degrees, well, that's giving you a fair indicator that the products are in there are they're not going to mix up well. So are they going to be as digestible? The fat in there is obviously not breaking down good enough, so they're looking for a higher temperature to get it to mix before the actual calf drinks it.
That's great, Liam. Most definitely, as you say, once the milk replacer that you're feeding currently, that you're happy with it, to keep going. That's some great advice. You touched there on the temperature particularly. From your experience, what would be the recommended feeding programme for spring-born calves, in relation to volumes or frequency or dilution rate? What's your thoughts on that?
Generally for, their baby calves coming in at 3 weeks of age, they don't have a massive room in it. So like you're not going to be able to put them onto meal straight away. They're obviously possibly stressed from being in a mart if they're not coming directly from a neighbouring farm or whatever. So the first thing is allow them a chance to settle and to put them on water and electrolytes, get their system, get them used to their environment, to give them a chance to rehydrate. Like they'll be generally coming off whole milk and they're expected then to go on to milk replacer and a different feeding system, different type shed with other calves coming from other farms. But generally what we do is electrolytes, get 2.5, 3 litres electrolyte, plenty of water into them, and then the next day then get them on to 3 litres morning and evening, or around 125 grams of powder in 875 mils of water to give you a litre of mixed milk. It's fierce important that it's in the litre as opposed to 125 grams on top of a litre, or your solid levels is only 11%. So you need 12.5% solids in a litre and 3 times that morning and evening, 3 litres in the morning, 3 litres in the evening. And do that then basically, if you're bought in, they're probably going to do that for the next 5 weeks and then wean over 2 to 3 weeks from basically 3 litres once a day, going down then to 2 litres over another 7 to 10 days and then off. Now, if you're buying in calves and your system is, again, if you're part-time farming as well, that you're probably looking at labour and you want to go once a day feeding, I would still say to you, you'd be better to let them settle, because they're on generally a twice a day feeding system. Let them settle for a week or two with 3 litres morning and evening, and then go once a day if you so wish. The calf would be just that bit stronger and able to adapt to the once a day system and take in enough concentrate to make up for the fact that they're only getting milk once a day.
And in relation to that, Liam, for the once a day versus twice a day feeding, can you just talk through, in the once a day programme, what time of day is best to feed the calf? And then in relation to the compounds within the milk replacer as to the dilution rate, etc., will that stay the same or higher or lower depending?
If you're on twice a day system and you're just going once a day, in terms of a weaning program, catching, you're generally on 3 litres at 375 grams with your 2.5 litres of water morning and evening. But if you're buying in calves and going once a day, well, then you'll generally be where calves were getting 750 grams of solids total in divided over 6 litres. Now you'll be going in with somewhere in the order of 500 to 550 grams of powder with 3.5 litres of water as a kind of a first feed. And over the space of a week, then going up from 500 grams plus 3.5 litres to 550 grams plus 3.5 litres, and then the next day 600 grams plus 3.5 litres. Keep building them up slowly, because if you go in too quick at basically 600 or 700 grams of solids of powder with 3.5 litres of water, a lot of calves are not able to handle that concentration, which is going up near 20%, as opposed to being on 12.5% when you're feeding in the 6 litres, and that can cause digestive disturbance. So you kind of need to start low and bring them all with you. And what you'll find once you cut the milk back, if they're on 6 litres a day and you cut 500 grams, you'll find the meal intake will basically zoom up overnight anyway. But you want plenty of water available, and the calves grouped according to size, and just keeping an eye then on your reservoir feeder when calves are drinking that they're all keen to drink,
And you touched there some of the digestive upsets. I suppose, what do you see as the common digestive upsets or issues when feeding milk replacer, or how can farmers prevent them?
If you're feeding a 50% skim milk powder, skim coming from the butter side has to clot. So it'll clot in the abomasum, in the calf's stomach. So if you're feeding something that's a 50% plus skim product, that could give you a good clot. And 3 litres of that, the calf basically will sit down, lie down then till basically that clot breaks down. But sometimes if you're feeding milk replacers and it's been sold as a skim, but the inclusion level of skim might be only about 15%, well then you have predominantly a whey powder and a small bit of skim, and the skim is trying to clot or will clot, and the whey won't. So you'll get milk products going through trying to empty quicker than some of the other ingredients, and that can cause a bit of digestive disturbance in the calf. But generally, if it's a 50% skim or a whey protein concentrate, which is basically what bodybuilders are chasing for muscle and for skeletal development, if that's the key ingredient in a product, both of those are readily digestible. But like I was saying to you when you asked me earlier on, the label tells you nothing about the product. Like you have no idea what level of heat was used in the drying of those products, or the downgraded products, or whatever is going into the product. So if you have a system that's working and you trust the product or the rep that you're dealing with, I'd say you'd be reluctant to change. In terms of the other issues in digestive disturbance is with all these automatic feeders, which are becoming greater presence on farm at the moment, that there's always a risk of abomasum or bloat, generally where calves are being grouped in groups of 30 in large sheds that tend to be cold, but also maybe not enough milk being fed on the plant, and the calves are getting stressed. Feeders maybe let run out of powder, and straight away then you have 20 or 30 calves waiting to get fed, and when they get in, then all of a sudden they're gulping, and you get either ruminal bloat, or if the concentration's wrong set on the machine, you get abomasum bloat kicking in. They tend to be more the issues in terms of digestive upset, not so much from the powders, but the whole management or feeding plans are set up in incorrect.
Most definitely, Liam, and I think consistency has come up throughout this podcast series, particularly around, feeding the milk replacer and timing. Obviously, for the feeder, it'll be slightly different to morning and evening, but feeding consistently, mixing, timing, and the heating of the milk.
Everyone is busy, especially calf rearers on the beef side who are predominantly part-time farming, so systems need to work consistently, and that has seen the growth of automatic feeders. If the plan is set up right, it'll step them up to the 6 or the 7 litres, which whatever the feed plan is. It'll feed them 3 times a day at set intervals. The machine will wash, and it'll gradually wean them then over 3 weeks. So that's a very simple system, and it guarantees consistency. Okay, if you're working 10 teat feeders or a milk cart or something like that, it's you can have a good system going. If you have a good boiler, the water heated up, you're checking the temperature, and you also have plenty of hot water there to wash up your reservoir feeders or whatever afterwards. You just have a good routine going. You can be consistent as well in terms of having plenty of hot water to get rid of biofilms on your 10 teat feeders. You can have a thermometer to make sure that your mixing temperature is correct the whole time, and a good strong mixer then to mix up your powder and to mark and measure again your how many scoops you need to make so many litres of water. And that if there's different people feeding, because often the consistency maybe goes out the window at the weekends with people at home, maybe extra pair of hands at home on the farm, and suddenly different people have different systems, and it's not as, that's when problems can kick in. Or if there's 3 or 4 people involved in the calf rearing system, you need maybe to have a protocol in place so that everyone understands what the measurements are and the way they should be fed.
And I think that's the key thing, the measurements. So there can be huge variation, as you say, Liam, there, and different people feeding at different times, and also in the amount of powder that actually fits in the scoop or the jug that you mentioned there. So that can have huge changes across a feeding system. You also mentioned there earlier the rumen development in early life of the calf is very important. How can farmers balance, the milk replacer feeding alongside supplementing with concentrates and forage introduction?
The main thing is kind of to remember that in general, we're dealing with a baby calf, and it's the abomasum, it's the milk stomach, is what drives growth in the first 5 to 6 weeks of a calf's life. And like if you give a calf 12 litres in a safe manner, it'll drink the 12 litres of milk. It'll drink 14, but it's not going to eat a kilo of concentrate. But we don't want to feed it 12 litres of milk. We want to feed it 6 at least in a safe manner. But in terms of growth, there is perceptions out there that if you feed too much milk and they won't eat the meal. They can't eat the meal at that young age. It's for the rumen won't be anywhere really developed until 10 to 12 weeks. But so like the other thing to remember is, I'd often go up to calf sheds and there'll be hay or there'll be silage introduced at 3 to 4 weeks of age to the calf. You're better leave these out till the calf is weaned. Hay will do nothing for rumen development. It'll actually depress your growth rates, because you're getting gut fill and stopping calves drinking milk. They'll reduce their consumption of milk and meal purely by filling themselves up in hay, which will do nothing to develop the rumen. So it's the meal will drive ruminal growth, but you want to offer meal or your ration or your cube, your pencil, basically small amounts from basically the minute they come into the shed. And like, look at enough computerized calf feeders, they'll probably take the concentrate quicker, purely because they're waiting there to get fed milk 3 times a day, whereas on your reservoir feeders, they're more fuller and they go back and lie down. But that being said, it's to keep it fresh, keep it offered to them, but they still need their 3 litres more than even the milk, and gradually the meal intake comes up. But the other thing, if you want to get the rumen to develop, they need access to clean water, and the cleaner and fresher the water, the more meal they will take in. But you're not going to see big volumes of meal being taken in till they're 4 or 5 weeks of age.
Most definitely, Liam, the water is a key thing that's sometimes overlooked. If you were to advise farmers this spring and you could change one thing about their feeding system or how they feed milk replacer, What advice would you have?
I'd say don't be in a hurry to get calves off milk replacer. I know everyone looks at the price and think it's expensive, but like a calf under 10 or 12 weeks, the most efficient time to put live weight onto a calf is that age. And definitely for the first 3 weeks, when the calf comes in February and March, when the weather is cold, I would be trying to go with 7 litres as opposed to the standard 6. Like 6 is where you're trying to hit an average of 0.75 of a kilo average daily gain for the first 12 weeks. But by feeding that extra litre of milk, definitely for the first 3 to 4 weeks, generally the recommendations on any bag of milk replacer will tell you that it's 6 litres if the temperature where the calf is lying down at most of the time, if he's 70% lying down, is 15 degrees. But a lot of the sheds you go into this week, last week, with the winds swirling around, 6 degrees is at best what you get. So you're short 100 grams to kind of hit that 0.75. And the calf is very efficient at utilising that extra litre of milk at that age. I would say to you, either if you with a bucket fed system or with 10 teeth feeders, you might be restricted to get that extra litre in, but then you can up the solids to 15%, 150 grams per litre, as opposed to 12.5. Whereas on the leg of a machine or something like that, you can just up the litres or change the concentration. It could be worth an extra 4 or 5 kilos live weight when you go to wean that calf by putting that small little bit extra in at that early stage when the calf is under pressure.
Most definitely, Liam, and that'll make all the difference at that stage. Thanks very much, Liam. That's great.
Thanks very much.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Liam for joining me on the show. If you missed any of the previous episodes in this Dairy Calf to Beef podcast series, don't forget to go back and listen on Apple as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.